Welcome in, everybody, to a cold, wet, football weather like day in Michigan. How's everybody doing today? It is Thursday, October 23rd. And like I said, it feels like football here, as Michigan is. You get hit with the winter and those cold weather seasons right away. And we got that for sure here in Michigan. And it makes me just think of football. This weekend, we got Michigan State happening. And it's exciting because it's football weather, and there's nothing better than football weather. I'd like it a little bit, warmer. 50, high 50s, low 60s. That's my type of weather for football. So the 40s and rain and cold wind, not as much of my forte, but excited for the weather to change over here and, maybe get some snow games here shortly. I will not be attending those, but I like watching them on TV. A couple weeks ago, Wyoming played, I think it was UNLV, and it was snowing, and it's like, what the heck? Like, it was early October, but that's what you get when you're out in that area of the U.S. So, as always, please like and subscribe to the YouTube show. I'm excited for this week because this week there are lots of weird matchups, and I want to recap the last week quickly as well. But I hope everybody is tuning into the picks I'm putting out there. We're not doing as good as we'd like. Okay, we're still winning overall for the season, but last week was a frustrating week because we had some good picks and they were very close losers. The money line parlay has been really bad recently, and we're locked in this week. And I love my money line parlay that I've cooked up, and you will see that tomorrow on the Instagram and the X page. I gotta start saying X, everybody, Twitter, X. It's Twitter to me, but I gotta politically correct and call it X. So today, I want to quickly talk about last week. We had 4 top 10 teams lose, and that's always a big deal. Whenever four of the top 10 teams lose games, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to shake up the poll. I think the only team that did not move in the college football poll this week was Ohio State at number one. We won't talk about their game, but they're dominating. They are really good. I'd like to talk about them in a ranked matchup, but we will not talk about them until probably Michigan. That's the only time that they're going to be discussed for a graphic game because the Big Ten's down in terms of who they're playing. I mean, UCLA, if UCLA beats Indiana this week and then keeps winning, that game could be ranked when UCLA comes to Columbus. But nonetheless, we start off Friday night, and I said on the show last week that I didn't think Miami was going to have any problems because the game was at home. Yes, Friday and Thursday night games in the ACC create all sorts of chaos in college football, and they have historically. A couple weeks ago, Florida State lost to Virginia. I'm going to be honest with you guys, if they played this week, Virginia would be favored. Florida State's fallen off a cliff. But there's notorious matchups on Friday and Thursday in the ACC that lead to upsets, and this was one of them. Louisville just dominated defensively. They made Carson Beck look horrible. Carson Beck had a really bad game. It wasn't just Carson Beck. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't stop Louisville's receivers at all. Miller Moss was able to shred up that defense. All in all, big win for Louisville. Jeff Brom vaults himself into potentially the opportunity to play for an ACC championship, which will get them to the playoff if that happens. Crazy to think that, if Georgia Tech runs the table and Louisville runs the table, you could be looking at, in the ACC, potentially an opportunity where Miami doesn't even make it into the championship game. So not good there. There was a close one. Texas A&M almost lost to Arkansas. We're going to get to Texas A&M in a little bit. Big win for Texas A&M on the road. Hold on there. It's not impressive that they only won by 3 against Arkansas, who fired their coach a couple weeks ago and has not been good this season, but you won the game. That's all that matters. Ole Miss lost to Georgia. They were underdogs, and you can't complain there because they were A, underdogs, and B, they're playing the number 9 team in the country. That was a good game, fun game, high-scoring game, and we're going to get to Ole Miss here in a second. They got another ranked big game coming up. Texas Tech was kind of the big one, I would say. They went to Arizona State, but if you look at this game, Baron Morton, the quarterback for Texas Tech, did not play, and if you think about it, look at Arizona State coming into the year. Sam Leavitt, they were a really high-ranked team coming into this season. And honestly, just have had some up and downs. They have 2 losses. They're not bad losses, really. When you think of who they've played, who they've lost to, it's I don't know. They lost to Mississippi State at Mississippi State by 4, and then they got killed by Utah without Sam Levitt. So nothing really there, I would say, too concerning. And then LSU lost to Vanderbilt, but like I said, Vanderbilt was favored in that game. So two of the losses that happened by top 10 teams, those top 10 teams were underdogs. Two of them were pretty big favorites and lost. So chaotic week, and it just shows that as an Ohio State team, they're just consistently winning, and they're not keeping it close. They're just taking care of business. Julian Sayin is going through the moon right now. I would say what his stock is. I think he is just making all the right reads, and excited to continue to watch Ohio State grow. They have a bye week this week, and then they play in a fun game next week that would have been a lot bigger. They play Penn State. So that game, was a lot bigger deal when Penn State was relevant, but they've lost 4 straight games. So we don't want to waste too much time talking about Penn State football. But let's get into week 9. Hard to believe, guys. Week 9 of the college football season. It's a weird slate. It is. There are 3 graphic games that we're going to get to in a second. There's some big lines that also are kind of intriguing games. And then there's a Michigan State game we got to get to at the end. So first up, I want to talk UCLA goes on the road to play Indiana. Indiana, outside of Ohio State, is the hottest team and the best team in college football. That's how the rankings say it. I will still defend. I don't see it. I don't see them being the second best team, and maybe I'm a hater. And if I'm a hater, sorry, but that's just my gut, and I trust my gut when I watch teams. And I just don't think they're the second best team. They're definitely a top 5 team. I just want to see this team against a legit team like Ohio State, and we're not going to get that until at the earliest, the Big Ten championship. And when you look at Indiana's schedule, the remainder this season, they're not going to get tested. They play UCLA in terms of by a top team. Okay, I'm not saying they're not going to get tested, but they play UCLA, they go at Maryland, they play at Penn State, they play Wisconsin at home, and they play Purdue. That's an on paper pretty easy 12-0 team in my opinion, and we'll see because it's hard to say Indiana's going to be 12-0. It's just very hard to say that. But, this is a UCLA team that's hot. They have won 4 straight games, and they just look the part. They look like they care. Their offense is scary, and I'm intrigued by this game. It'll be fun, but I will say Indiana's a 26.5-point favorite. A lot of the sports books that's gone up, so that's intriguing to me. That means people are putting a lot of money on Indiana because it keeps going up, and 26.5, yikes, that just, I don't know, that's weird. I've watched UCLA play in person a couple weeks ago in East Lansing, and they look really good. Now they're going to play a huge step up in opponent in Indiana. At Indiana, it's a big noon kickoff, so there's going to be a lot of hype around that game. So the next game, and this is our first graphic game of the week, number 8 Ole Miss goes on the road to play number 13 Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a 5.5-point favorite, and the over-under for this game is 52.5. So thinking about this game, I look at these teams, and I say they could be potentially playing for their playoff life. The reason I say that is, if you can avoid that second loss, and we're going into November next week, you look at Ole Miss's schedule, okay? They play Oklahoma this week, and then they play South Carolina at home, the Citadel at home, Florida at home, and then they play at Mississippi State, okay? I would venture to guess they are probably favored in all 4 of those games, if I had to guess. We look at Oklahoma, though. Oklahoma has a much harder schedule, okay? They play ranked teams the rest of the year. So I think for Oklahoma, if they don't win this game, they're out. See ya. You are they play, listen to this, Tennessee at Tennessee next week, at Alabama the next week, home against Missouri, home against LSU. So I don't see them, if they win this week, I don't see them winning all 4 of those games. And if they do, lock them up for a playoff. They'll probably be potentially playing for the SEC championship. Ole Miss, though, I think you can see Ole Miss, they could lose and still be okay, but they got to take care of business, go 7-1, and then allow yourself 4 games where you're going to be favored. Going at Mississippi State the last week of the year, You don't want to have that game be something that if you lost, you're out of the playoff race. But big game in the SEC. And what I want to see is how LSU stop or Ole Miss stops the run for Oklahoma. Oklahoma has been able to run the football really well the last couple weeks. It's just weird. Jaden Ott was a guy a lot of people thought would come in here and be a 1,000-yard rusher. He struggled this year mightily, but they have other guys like Torrey Blaylock. John Mateer is a guy that always can run. He has that injury from a couple weeks ago, but they have not played since that Texas game. And so that's big for his health because he can get a little bit of rest. But I will say, though, on the flip side, this Ole Miss team I like a lot. I do. I like Trinidad Chambliss a lot. I like their playmakers. Their defense struggled last week against Georgia. They did. And I think Oklahoma and Georgia, I would say, are both comparable offenses, have a dual threat quarterback, have good running games, and have good pass catchers. So what I think is intriguing about that is I think it's really hard to have two of those games back to back because there is an element when you're running the football that's bruising football. And if you have to stop that the whole game, it could be a struggle. But I would say I'd probably lean Ole Miss plus 5.5. I think this game you could tell me the Oklahoma wins by 3, wins by 4. You could see a 24-20 game, a 20 or 31-28 game, anything like that. I could see happening in this game, and therefore I would probably lean Ole Miss to cover. I do think Oklahoma wins this because I kind of think it's their all or nothing game when you look at the schedule coming up. I just think it's too hard after this. I think they got to win this game. We have another game that was going to be a graphic game at 12. South Florida goes on the road to play Memphis. This was a potential, like I said, for a top 25 game. South Florida is kind of the favorite, but for a while the favorite was Memphis in the American, but Memphis really tripped up last week and lost at home against UAB. They were a huge favorite and lost. So keep an eye on this game at noon on ESPN2. I just think that's one that you'll want to watch because that is going to tell us a lot of who wins the American. Also for playoff contention, you got to think about that because we look at a team like UNLV or Boise State out of the Mountain West. Boise State obviously dominated UNLV, but probably those two are on course or on track to play in the Mountain West. And if UNLV wins out, plays in that, and they are, let's say they'd be 12-1 in that scenario, but one of these teams has 2 losses, I'd be very curious to see who the committee puts in as the Group of 5 champion. Alabama plays at South Carolina. South Carolina's been a huge disappointment, so I don't want to spend too much time there. Next graphic game we have is number 15, Missouri goes on the road to play top 10 team Vanderbilt. Missouri is a 2.5-point dog, over under set at 52.5. And guys, I like Vandy here, and that's crazy. Like, I think Vandy is going to win this game. I think Vandy is going to be top 10, or they're going to obviously go up in that rankings. And I'm just like, can this Vandy team make the playoff? I look at their schedule after this. They play at Texas next week. Obviously, pretty hard game, I think. But you never know with Texas. They've not looked great this season. They then go at home against Auburn and Kentucky, and then they finish the year at Tennessee. For a long time, Vanderbilt and Tennessee played that last game, and it was completely irrelevant. This game this year is going to be awesome. Like, it's going to be a top 25 game unless Tennessee falls off or Vanderbilt falls off. This is two gritty teams, okay? Eli Drinkwitz and Clark Lee, 2 coaches, very underrated in the national media, starting to get a lot more, I would say, love here the last year, definitely for Clark Lee. Eli has been, in the public eye for the last couple of years. I think he's a guy that people know is a good coach, but maybe Mizzou hasn't won the big game, and so he's kind of been not viewed that way in a sense. But 2.5-point favorites, Vanderbilt. I like Vanderbilt a lot. I do. I just do because I saw what this team did last week against LSU. They dominated the game in a lot of ways. And when I look at that, I say I think they got the better quarterback in Diego Pavia. Stud running back, though, on Mizzou, Ahmad Hardy. Mizzou has a very good defensive line. You saw what Zion Young did last week against Auburn. I had Auburn to cover. They were winning for most of the game. Zion Young took over in overtime, and they lost that game. Failed to cover. But when I look at this game, I'm like, I think this is very similar, okay, to what I just talked about with the Oklahoma game is potentially for Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt has the harder schedule remaining. So I put them in the Oklahoma category because if you look at Mizzou's schedule, a little bit more manageable. They play Texas A&M next week in 2 weeks at home. They play at home against Mississippi State. They then go to at Oklahoma and at Arkansas to end the year. So when you look at that schedule on paper, yeah, it's intriguing because I'm like, what's going to happen here? So I just give the nod in this game. I give it to to Vanderbilt. That's what I see. BYU goes on the road to play Iowa State. They're a 2.5-point dog. That game's intriguing at 3:30 on Fox. Illinois goes to Washington. Illinois is a 3.5-point dog there, so we could have some potential for, I guess, some upsets there. Texas goes at Mississippi State, 7.5-point favorite. Texas barely beat Kentucky last week. They're just a weird team. They have so much talent, but they sure don't show it. They unfortunately do not show that talent. And then the last graphic game we're going to get to, LSU at home against Texas A&M. LSU is a 2.5-point underdog at home. This game could be the last game for LSU and Brian Kelly, truly. If LSU's lost 3 games with what Brian Kelly described as the best roster he's had, I think that would be really hard for the fans. I mean, this is a team that in 2 weeks plays at Bama and then at the end of the year plays at Oklahoma. So they have those 2 games remaining, 2 easier games sandwiched between that. But I'm leaning LSU here because of the kitchen sink game. It's a night game at LSU. Those are hard to win. Texas A&M is the number 1 team in the SEC, but I think on the road here is tough. I know they went in and beat Notre Dame. They're coming off a game at Arkansas that did not leave me, I guess, feeling great about them. But I'm going to stay away from like putting a pick out there on this game just because I think it's hard to predict. But, you look at the quarterback play. Garrett Nussmeier, his offensive line isn't giving him a lot of time. I watched almost all of that Vanderbilt game, and it's like he snaps the ball and they're in the backfield immediately, and you just can't win that way. You can't. And he has such good playmakers that are making plays for him that it's helping. But going up against a team like Texas A&M with Marcel Reed, they got Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion. They just have guys, and that is why I'm not going to pick it. My gut says LSU wins this game because it's at home, and the line is evident in that being that they're only 2.5-point dogs when they have 2 losses and Texas A&M has none. But I do want to get into, I did not make a graphic for it, but you got it. We're in the state of Michigan. Everyone that tunes into this show, to my knowledge, cares about this game. So Michigan State is a 14.5-point underdog at home. This game's on NBC, 7:30. It's interesting. It's a hard game for me to know what's going to happen. And the reason I think and say that is because I think the strengths of both these teams actually favor Michigan State in a game. I'm not saying Michigan State's going to win. I'm just saying I think Michigan State on paper and what we've seen has a decent offense. And we've seen at times, Michigan not be as good defensively as they've been in the past. But then, I say that and they play Washington last week and just dominate them. So I'm not saying Michigan's defense is bad. I'm not. What I see in this game is if Justice Haynes doesn't play and Michigan struggles to run the ball, Michigan State is not terrible against the run. They're not. They've showed okay this year against the run. It's the pass that they're horrible against. And Michigan's shown times not letting Bryce Underwood really throw it and sling it. And if that's the game script on Saturday and they're struggling to run it and you force them into passing situations, I'm just intrigued what happens. And, it's always going to be a packed crowd there. It's always going to be a rowdy one. I can't go to the game, so I sold our tickets, but I'm intrigued by it. Let's just use the word intrigued by this game. But 14.5 points. State's going to cover, okay? I have to pick Michigan State to cover. Maybe we'll even put it out as a pick, but then again, that might be stupid because if they lose or if they don't cover, people will say it's a homer pick. So we'll see there. But guys, like I said, it is football season. It is cold. It is raining. It is just what you think end of October should be. It's crazy to think this is our last weekend of college football in October. Next week, we got Halloween weekend, but also we have November football. Crazy to think, but we're here. We're moving on. We're a couple weeks away from getting the first playoff ranking revealed to us, and we'll be putting that out on the channel and everything when that's out. But guys, you're going to get better picks from me this week. I apologize for last week. Stick with me. We'll give you some good winning picks, and I will see you next week on another episode of the Tate's Take.